Aloha! Welcome to Mandala Living Foods, Cooking in the Kitchen with Micah Skye. This is our first in-kitchen video. We just wanted to rock out an amazing seasonal video for you guys for everyone's favorite seasonal pie that we're going to make live, pumpkin pie. So how do we make live pumpkin pie? Because normally pumpkin has to be cooked to break down all the starches. The pumpkin comes from the squash family. It's similar to a gourd. The starches in squash are very dense, they're very hard, they're undigestible. So how do we do this to stay within our 117 degrees? We're going to work with hot water blanching and a series of blanches. Now you'll notice in the book, it says to add hot water and blanch your pumpkin after you've cut it into pieces like this. And this is where getting into the kitchen, we can actually really kind of explore more in depth and detail. I recommend 2-3 rounds of draining it, hot water back in to continue to tenderize your pumpkin without cooking it. We want it to get to a place where it's soft. It breaks apart actually. Okay, it's soft because then it's going to puree into our filling. We still have all the characteristics of the pumpkin. In fact, some more fresh flavors and layers to pumpkin when it's not fully cooked. Also, of course, we have our enzymatic supply that comes with living foods. It's beautiful and amazing. And this is one of my favorite pies to make for the holidays, which is why I wanted to share this video with you guys. So we're going to take our hot water. We're going to pour it into our mixing bowl with our pumpkin, just like this. We have it here. It's blanching right now. And while that's heating and tenderizing, we're going to make our pie crust. So in our recipe, we have a cup and a half of already finely ground almonds. So I want, for perspective, you to understand that doesn't mean a cup and a half of whole almonds. A cup and a half of finely ground almonds there's going to be a lot more almonds that will fit into that cup and a half. So you don't want to go with a cup and a half of whole almonds. You want to grind them down. I recommend grinding a little bit extra, like I've ground here into this bowl. And then you can measure it out. You can use these for another pie crust. You can sprinkle them on top if you want to have like an almond crumble on top of your pumpkin pie. You can also use the extra grounds to dry and densify the crust if it's a little too datey, if it seems a little too sticky. Ultimately, we are making a pie crust just like this. Go ahead and take a look. I've already made one right here that we're going to use, but I'm going to take you through making a pie crust right now as well. We also have our 3 cups of dates here, okay? And then, of course, we have our cup and a half of coconut. Put a little bit more in here. There we go. Now, this is dry shredded coconut. And even with the dry shredded coconut, we want to pulverize it to a finer texture. So let's do our coconut first right now, because we already have our almond ground to a fine pulp. And here we go. You can also pulse it. A lot of times it helps to pulse when you're doing the almonds. That way you'll get a more even ground texture to it. You won't get little chunks of almond, but with the shredded coconut, it's pretty uniform in size and it's already pretty fine, so we just leave it on and grind it. I'm working with a Waring food processor. The Waring food processor is one of my favorites. It's a commercial brand. It's definitely very durable and sturdy. It works with high volume, so it can handle any load of food you're doing personally in the kitchen. All right, that's looking pretty good. A little bit more. All right, finely ground. Let's see here. Very fine ground. And now we're going to add our coconut and almond together. Now, this is a secret to make a more uniform salt textured into the dough. Because as soon as we start adding the honey and the dates, it's going to start doughing up. So we want to get that salt uniformly distributed. So we're going to take our sea salt. We're going to put that teaspoon of sea salt in. Find our teaspoon. There we go. So we got our teaspoon of sea salt. Once we get that in, we're going to make sure it's uniformly mixed, and we're going to merge the almond and the coconut together. All right, so now we have a uniformly mixed almond and coconut. We have our sea salt in there. Next, we want to lubricate the processor, the food processor, the inside chamber here, because we're going to have some very sticky ingredients coming in that tend to stick around the sides and will actually be more challenging for your blade. So we want to add our coconut oil next. So we have our, now you don't want to go too much over, because then you get a very oily pie crust. So we want to go a 1/4 cup. With our raw coconut oil. Got our 1/4 cup. I'm going to even just kind of pour it around the sides. Before I put anything sticky in here, any of our honey or our dates, our final ingredient, we're going to kind of grease the sides of the container. All right. And it's already starting to kind of congeal and pulp up, so to speak, into our dough. Now, from here, we got our honey and our dates. So we're going to pit our dates. And be sure with dates, I got to say, that you check your dates as you open them, because you'll find a little black powder mold that forms sometimes in dates. And if you're not mindful, you'll be throwing that mold into your pie crust, and that is a no-go. So we want to make sure we get this little top cap off of the dates, as well as our seed. We are at 2 cups now, so we'll pull a few more out. Now, you don't need to press the dates in to get the 2 or 3 cups, because you'll end up having a very overdated pie crust. So we just want to get them right up to the line. We're kind of loosely packing them into the pitcher. Looks good. As you get into making these pie crusts, you'll be able to rock one of these out within, 15 to 20 minutes. It becomes second nature. So it's always a little more time and presence the first time you're doing any recipe. Let's see where we at. We are up to 3 cups. So we have our 3 cups of dates. Right. 3 cups of dates now. Got our dates. Before we put our dates in, though, we want to get that honey in there because the honey's going to start acting as a binding agent, and it's going to kind of set the platform for us where the dates will kind of be the final heave-ho. And here's another little trick of the trade. Pour whatever you use for your coconut oil. Generally, I'll use actually a smaller individual cup. Like even one of these. Use the coconut oil first, okay? And as we put that, so I'm going to actually transfer over. I'm going to take some of the residual coconut oil right here. I'm just going to line the cup with it. Then when we put our honey in, it's not going to stick to the cup. It's going to glide off because of the coconut oil. Smart, smart, smart. So it doesn't stick to the measuring cup because it is actually rolling off from the coconut oil that lined the cup first. So that's a little secret to not have to be gooping and scooping on the honey. So we're going to lightly mix in the honey first. There it goes. And finally comes the dates. Now you don't want to just throw all these dates in at one time. You're going to start with maybe half the dates here. And then we're going to start actually blending them in. Here we go. Sometimes I'll tip this to the side because it actually allows the blade to get a little more traction. It can be a lot for it to take all this on. The more that you fill the food processor, the more you can see how it's starting to collect, it's starting to spin, and it's starting to create that dough texture that we want. And when we really get it, to that completed stage, it's going to be doughing into a ball and kind of spinning in one giant clump, rotating around. And again, it should be gliding, if you lubricate the chamber right, gliding through the coconut oil as we do it. Okay, so you can see those dates are starting to blend in. Put in some more. Goal is to not overwhelm the food processor. You might need to stop it and just kind of move some things around to get it to continue blending. See how when I tip it up, it gets a little more of a, the blade gets a little leverage in breaking up the dates. Ooh, we're almost there. Okay, final dates coming in. Kind of place them around. You don't want to generally clump them into a big old clump. There we go. I'm going to break them up. Now you can see how it's starting to spin around like that. It's starting to clump into a ball. So that's our dough. Our dough is happening. Holding it up so you can really see it as it moves. And you'll be able to see if you have any unprocessed dates. They stand out. You can see there's a uniform texture here. You can see there's little bits right there. But the goal, again, is to get it as uniformly mixed as possible before we transfer it back into a mixing bowl. Here, I'm going to stop it again. I'm going to break up some pieces over here and just give it the ability to continue mixing evenly. Right, I'd say we are almost 100%, got a little more date shrapnel, so to speak, left. We're going to try to get that last bit to blend. Okay, so just to make sense of this, and what we've created, we're going to dump it out here. Okay, notice it comes right off the blade. Boom, and now we have our pie crust dough ball. Roll it into our ball. There it is. You can see how as I press it, some of the oil's coming out. That's actually good because we're going to roll this out with our pin. So we need that oil on here. We want that oil so that our rolling pin doesn't stick to it. Boom. And there we have our dough ball for our pie crust ready to go. All that time that took to make our pie crust, our pumpkin has been blanching, has been tenderizing. And let's just say that we let it pause and we ran 2 or 3 more cycles of hot water to tenderize our pumpkin to where it is now. All right. So let's say that we've tenderized our pumpkin to where it needs to be. Our pie crust is done. Oh, and we have a guest here at Mandala Living Foods Kitchen. My daughter, she's here showing up for her shift for work because we are literally running the cafe while we're shooting this video right now. She came in to assist us on this pumpkin pie. Thanks for joining us, Leora. This is my daughter, Leora. So she's going to strap on with the apron, get all dialed in, and we're going to continue on to make our pumpkin filling and roll out our crust. Stick with us. Okay, so we now have our ball of dough. We are going to roll it out. In fact, a lot of times I'll start with pressing it down, just getting it as flat as I can, and then I'll roll it the rest of the way. Now, when rolling, I recommend going one direction. Don't go back and forth because your rolling pin a lot of times will catch the dough, will pick up the dough. So you want to roll one direction as you go, rolling out in every direction, expanding out your circle. Good. Try to make sure you have a cutting board that has grip. I put a towel under this clear one. I wanted to do the clear one so you guys could really see the shape of it over the cutting board underneath. So you'll see as we're rolling it out. Now, our goal is to roll this out, and then we're going to throw this in the freezer. So this is Our pumpkin is still tenderizing, and we're rolling this out, rolling it out, rolling it out. There we go. Now you want to make those edges clean as you roll. Those. And you want to get the thickness to be uniform. You don't want thinner spots in your crust. So if you have too much going to one side, you're going to start at one end and then it'll roll the kind of whole body of the crust over. That is a pretty clean pie crust we have going on, friends. So now we're going to take this pie crust that we just flattened out and we're going to throw it in the freezer. So I can see a little edge here, it got a little thin over here. So I want to just even that out. There we go. So now this goes into the freezer. And what that's going to do is it's going to toughen it up. It's going to make it denser. So it'll be easier for us to put it into the pan, into the pie pan that we're going to go into. You want to take that and put it in the freezer? Our freezer here at our little country cafe is actually outside. So she's going to go take that pie crust, put it into the freezer. And while it's hardening and getting ready to be folded into our pan, we're going to focus on the pumpkin filling, okay? As we get into this pumpkin filling, we're going to strain first and foremost our pumpkin. I'm going to go strain it. Now our goal in straining this, we want to get as much water out as possible. This is very similar to our apple pie as well, which is how we soften our apples. I'm actually taking a paper towel and I'm just going in and I'm just pressing any extra water out of this. Go. All right. So we have our pressed and dry pumpkin here, ready to go. It's softened, it's tenderized, and it's going to be the base of our filling for our pumpkin pie. Okay, moving on to our filling. We have our dry soaked coconut here that's been pressed and dried out, paper towel. It's tender and ready to be blended. We got our teaspoon of ginger. We have our 3 cups of coconut meat. Now, as much as I'm not a big promoter of cashews, if you don't have access to coconut meat, you can use cashews as a substitute if you have to. I just want to say that for the record and the recipe. Obviously, there would be soaked cashews. So we're going to start. We're going to start and grab the honey too.
Honey?
Yep. So we're going to start by putting our pumpkin and our ginger, that teaspoon of ginger in. We got our 3 cups here. We're going to puree our pumpkin, our coconut, and ginger all together. We want them to come into a nice puree. Now, the reason we're using a food processor as opposed to, so you can see it, the reason we're using this food processor as opposed to a Vitamix is because we want a little more texture for our pumpkin pie. And Vitamixes tend to almost over puree some things. I also recommend the same for the New York style cheesecake. Food processor is actually going to create a more realistic texture of cheese, of the cheesecake texture. Some of the mousse pies or the cosmic blue, we want more of a puree so we can do it in the Vitamix. Here we go. Now it's starting to evenly break it up, and we're going to support that by getting our cup of coconut oil in here. Raw coconut oil. Mind you, I want to support you to be more liberal than conservative on the coconut oil, okay? Because it is our binding primary hardening agent that is going to create a real dense texture for our coconut pumpkin mixture. So I'm actually going to try to have a little spill over. We're going to try to get that back in. Actually add a little bit more. So you could even do a cup and a third if you wanted to. And you can also add a half cup of coconut butter. You want to really make your pumpkin pie a little denser, or almost taking it to like a pumpkin cheesecake. All right, from here we're going to get it going again. Now we want to make sure if there's any pieces that are getting up on the side edge here, we want to get it into the mix. Once it starts pureeing, if there's any other chunks, sometimes they'll just float around in here. It will not become part of our puree. So from here, we have our spices. We have a teaspoon of sea salt to add. And in terms of our spices kind of across the board, we're looking at teaspoons. We're really only going with 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. But the rest, it's pretty much all teaspoons, single teaspoons. So let's get our cinnamon in there right off the bat. I'm a big fan of cinnamon. If you saw it in the Urban Spice Guide, cinnamon's really good for inflammation, among so many other things. And obviously is a classic spice for the holidays that also really gives us that traditional pumpkin spice signature flavor. So we also have nutmeg, which we're doing a teaspoon of, cardamom, and allspice as well. Like I said, I'm very open and liberal with my spices, very free-flowing with them. Some less than others. Nutmeg I tend to be more controlled on, whereas cardamom, I love working with cardamom. I love lots of cardamom and things. Cardamom, again, check Urban Spice Guide, has all kinds of amazing health benefits to it. Very ancient spice, deeply regarded by the cultures that have cultivated it for ages. So then we have one more, that teaspoon of our allspice and clove. And then we actually put a half teaspoon of coriander, which is one that's normally used in savory foods. But coriander, again, amazing for the body, for health and wellness, for digestion. We also have found a beautiful place for it in sweet desserts as well as savory desserts. Okay, from there, we have our teaspoon of sea salt. Always using a Himalayan salt, ideally Himalayan. We use this container, but we get a special Himalayan sea salt. And I also recommend really amazing sea salt. It's worth investing in a good, legit mineral sea salt, Himalayan sea salt. That's good. You can put that on in there. All right, we have a 1/4 cup of honey. We're going to use let's use this one because it's got the oil in it. So, or if you want to do the 1/4 cup here, just put a little coconut oil in there, which I'm not opposed to, and then put the honey in, and and then the honey won't stick to the cup as important. All right. Now I like to also add vanilla to mine, so we'll do some vanilla extract. And then again, I work with some specific stevias that are good. There's a lot of stuff coming out about stevia. It really just depends on the source. So that's our vanilla extract that we have. You can put the stevia, you cannot. If you don't use any of higher quality stevia or monk fruit, then I recommend probably doing a half cup with the honey instead. Where we at? We need to open another one of those.
I don't see any up there.
Same with your honey. Source your honey. Well, this is an organic honey from Brazil. We source most of our honey locally on Kauai. This is just the one we're specifically using today. You swap out that top lip. This one. All right, so we have our quarter cup of honey because we are putting our stevia in this one. It's actually a stevia monk fruit mix, and you can find those. You can find the extracts. They're pretty powerful. Generally, if you're doing a monk fruit extract or a stevia monk fruit extract, you're going to do 2 droppers of. So here is what our magic looks like. Filling process underway. We're going to flip it on. Again, we're going to check the sides, scooping any of those little extra pieces back into the mix. You can see texture-wise, it's not totally to the pureed state we want it to be. Almost looks kind of like a mushy oatmeal. So we're going to keep going. I'm going to put a little bit of that coconut butter, a little bit different than the oil, but really good for creating a more dense setting for our pie. Especially when it starts filling up and getting really thick, I will kind of turn my food processor at different angles, and it allows the blade to hit at different angles that we want a little more space, leverage, ability for the blade to puree. Like I said, this isn't a Vitamix, so we're going to get a more textured puree, which I like for my pumpkin pie. You want it to be a little more, and I'm going to add a little more cinnamon for mine. Like I said, a fan. This is going to take it to that pure, cleaner kind of, this is going to take it to the next level of our purees. We're going to add that bit of water, which is the last thing we didn't put in yet. You can also use coconut water if you want to. It's a lighter color for the pumpkin. And that's because this pumpkin is not cooked, so it didn't dry because it wasn't roasted. All right, so now we're at that stage where we want to taste it. We want to see what our filling is, where are we at in our filling? This is going to let you know what you need to add for your personal preference. Everyone likes different flavor profiles of pumpkin pie. Some of us like it sweeter. Some of us like it less sweet. Also, pumpkins are different. How the coconut purees is going to be different. We're working with organic ingredients so they can vary. So this is our nice check-in stage. I'm going to go with some more honey. I want this a little sweeter. This was a pretty dense pumpkin. All right. So that is going to get us to our very coarse, rich, textured pumpkin pie that's going to go on our pie crust. So from here, we'd pull out our pie crust. We're going to set our pie crust, and then we're going to put our filling in. I'm going to show you all, if you want a cleaner, smoother texture, if you want it to be a more pureed texture, I'm going to show you how we do that by adding in the Vitamix. So from this point, if this is where you like it, we go into the pie crust next. For those that want it a little more pureed, we're going to go into this extra step and show you it. So I'm going to transfer this now into my Vitamix. And on to the rest. Here we go. We don't want to let any of this pie filling go to waste. Now, this is also going to enrich the color because it's going to blend this pumpkin a little more into the coconut. The specific pumpkin we had was not a really dark meat pumpkin. It's more golden anyways, which is what we're seeing here. Right. Then we are going to take this over to our blending station here. Here we're going to puree to our desired texture. You start low. Go higher. That is looking good. There we go. Okay, now it's pie crust time. Final stages, and to me, one of the more fun stages of the pie crust is kind of the arts and crafts stage. We're going to get our pie pan, and we are going to mold our crust into the pan that's been sitting in the freezer. It's denser. It's going to be easier to mold, kind of like a clay. You could use a glass pan, or you could use what we use a lot of times, which is like a cheesecake pan, which helps because when you slide a knife around the side after it's refrigerated and set, the edges pop right off. It's very easy to cut that way. So we're going to actually go with one of those instead of a glass pan today. So here's that pan, an example. Here's an example of this cheesecake pan. You can see it has a spring latch on the side, pops right off. The bottom is here. You can actually flip the bottom this way or this way. We're going to go this way today, but you can flip it upside down as well. And sometimes it's easier depending on the dessert that you're doing. Okay, we got our pie crust out of the freezer. It is harder, denser now. It's also kind of stuck on here. So how do we get it off? We're going to take a knife or a dough scraper that we use for baking, which I'm going to use this time specifically. And we're going to just slide it along the edge here. And that's just going to get it to come off of our cutting board. There it goes. Kind of go in a circle around. Make sure you just keep it flush to the surface, the cutting board, as you're pushing. That way you won't scrape any of the pie crust off. Once you get under one place, and sometimes it's easier to do this with a blade, but I like the scraper. As long as you keep contact with underneath, it starts sliding. You go in a circle around, and it starts coming off. Boom, there it is. Okay. So we're going to put the cleaner side out, which is here. We're going to place it on into the center, and we're going to evenly let it kind of start collapsing down in and setting into our frame. You guys can see that. And from here, we're just going to kind of move it around and start pressing it in and making sure it's even. You want to make sure you get the right sized cheesecake pan, if that's what you're using, for the pie crust size. So this is a pretty wide cheesecake pan. Now, I could have done a thicker, taller pumpkin pie if I wanted to by using a smaller one. But this is more of a traditional size, which is perfect. We want to make sure we make the edges to our pie crust even. You'll really see how you did when you're looking at it from up above. You can see it's overall pretty even. It's looking pretty good. Now comes pouring our filling. So we're going to pour it on in now. Let's pour it right in the center. And as we're pouring, we're going to just start also kind of using our spatula to help it get on in there. Pouring it in. I always get a beautiful kind of off-gassing of all the spices that we used as it's coming out. Smelling very fresh. Okay, good. Good job. And then from there, we're gonna get the rest of it out. We don't want to miss out on any of this filling. Try to get every little bit we can. Okay. So from here, we're gonna shake it to where it's in a level place. There it goes. Good. Now it's ready to go into the fridge and set. That is our live pumpkin pie. Now let's take a look at this pie because we got one ready to show you guys. In fact, it was perfectly untouched, but of course we already had a customer come along that we couldn't help but tell we had it, and so we have a slice that's already been cut out of it, which is beautiful though because you're going to get to see the texture and density inside of it. So from here, we're going to get our saran wrap, and it's going to go right into our fridge. And we're going to let that set for the next 4 to 6 hours. Usually, I prefer to have this set overnight. And when we pull it out the next day, we have a beautiful pumpkin cheesecake. So, like I said before, you can take a knife, a butter knife, or a regular cutting knife. You'll see how I'm sliding along the edges of the pie to make sure that it's not sticking to the pan itself. You can see it pops right off. Voila. Cheesecake. Take a look at the density inside, just like a traditional cheesecake. Not cooked, completely live crust. All the flavors are there. All the tradition. All of the aspects of the holidays that you can have still live, uncooked, raw, full of enzymes. delicious, and ready to bring to your family's gatherings to introduce them to the concept that you eat life, it gives life to the body. You eat dead things or cooked things, it gives less life to the body. We are what we eat. So then, of course, pumpkin pie is not pumpkin pie without whipped cream. Let's divvy up a slice of this now. Take a look at that. It's our pumpkin pie. So that's where you're going to want to go to the coconut whipped cream recipe in our book, which is another video for sure. I'm going to pull out the ready-made coconut whipped cream. Again, you can supplement with cashews, although as I've said before, I've expressed why I don't use them anymore. I know it's harder to get coconut for many of you in different parts of the world. We're working on a coconut company that will supply raw creams and working on this national brand. But until then, use what you can. Ideally, things that are less processed are always better. So we're going to take a scoop of this coconut whipped cream right here. Front row seat on that. We're going to drop it on top here. I like a dash of cinnamon on top. Live pumpkin pie and whipped cream. For you, for your family, an amazing living foods alternative from me and my family to you.